Hello everybody, welcome along this morning. Before I start quickly, I must say the app is working, so we're going to use that for any questions that you have at the end of the session. So if you haven't downloaded it already, please do it quickly now, and that's the way to submit any questions that you might have for Michael at the end of this session. Feels slightly strange doing an introduction to you, but I'll just pretend you're not there for a second. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here this morning. Thank you very much for joining us to talk to this gentleman who has such an incredible breadth of experience to his life, really, be that as a writer, be that as a comedian, be that as an actor, be as a broadcaster, and still going strong, and still so many things for us all to enjoy. A new book coming out before the end of the year, Erebus, The Story of a Ship, a new drama on ITV, Vanity Fair, and more pressing is an extraordinary two-part series that he has made for Channel 5, where he went to North Korea. An extraordinary and unique series, which will be broadcast later in September. 2 years of planning, complete high levels of negotiation to get unprecedented access in this incredibly unknown territory. Michael Palin, welcome.
Thank you.
Give him a round of applause, please. I'm going to get straight in with the clip very soon, but before we get to that, what was the appeal to this particular project? Why did you want to do it and stick with it? Because it was 2 years worth of, actually coming to fruition.
Well, I mean, I particularly like travelling to places that are off the beaten track, and no country is further from the beaten track, I think, than North Korea. So when Channel 5 asked me to do it, a long time before we actually got to filming it, I said, I've got to go. I've just got to go. Because I'm interested in countries which seem to be demonised from the outside. I want to know something behind the headlines. What's really going on there? What are the people like? They're not necessarily to blame for the politics and all that sort of thing. So if it could work, I said, yes, I'll do it. Although I must say it's the first of all the countries I've been asked to go to, which my wife actually balked at slightly. She said, you're going to North Korea, dear? Normally she's very, very keen for me to go on very long journeys. I think perhaps that was it. It was just a very short journey.
Or maybe she thought you weren't coming back.
Yes, exactly. There was absolutely no hesitation in saying I'll do it. All I would say is, as we got nearer to the time, I thought, how are we going to do this? Because certainly at the end of last year, things were looking very bad out there. America and Kim Jong-un and Trump were trading insults and all that. It looked as though it would be a very dangerous and difficult place to go to. Then suddenly things changed with Kim Jong-un's speech, I think New Year's Day speech this year. And then suddenly it looked as though we had the green light.
Well, we're going to take a look at your arrival right now in our first clip from the series. I've been lucky enough to see the first episode, and we'll show some wonderful clips throughout the session. But what was your emotion? What was your feeling as you were pulling up and as you were told to turn that camera off, and that was your first experience? A
combination of things. One is I was tired and shagged out after a night on a Chinese overnight train. It was very tiring. Also, I mean, I wasn't exactly nervous or fearful, but I was apprehensive. I think we all were, just because it's a volatile situation there, even though there's a kind of rapprochement, feeling of rapprochement between North Korea and the rest of the world. You still didn't know what was going to happen, whether you'd actually get in, or at the last minute your papers would be sort of rescinded, or else something would happen. Someone would fire a missile somewhere, and that would be it. We were there. Then we probably wouldn't get out. So little kind of anxieties about being hostages and all that did go through my head. I'm not sure with the rest of us. What was nice, what I liked about the way it was shot, it was very intimate, really. I mean, the camera was there, and just whenever I wanted to say something, I just talked to the camera. So we didn't have a sort of series of set pieces to camera, sum up all your feelings now. So a lot of that is just as we're going along, and I'm taking it all in, and I'm tired and shagged out, and I'm trying to make sense of it all, and I'm apprehensive. But it has a sort of real feeling of intimacy, I think, those moments. Yeah.
The crew is such an important part of this journey in terms of, and on a programme particularly like this, where you're kind of stepping into the unknown, but that relationship between you as a crew in terms of it not just being about their ability technically to get things on the moment, on the fly, but also as a group of people who there has to be a relationship there as well. Was that an important part for you?
I mean, it's always very, very important. You are what your team is, really. Mm-hmm. But in this, I think it would have been a very lonely place if you're just on your own, because things were different, things were a bit strange, things were unfamiliar. So the fact that the crew were all there on the same adventure, and also biting their lips slightly and all looking slightly concerned and a bit bemused. At least you were sharing your bemusement and your uncertainty. And that made it part of the adventure, really. And I'm very, very glad there were people there to sort of share it with me.
What did you want to achieve with the series? What did you want it to be about, and what did you want to try and get to and discover?
Well, I wanted to really do the same as I've done with most of my series, which is trying to get below the sort of the barrier of authority or above the barrier of the tourist board, and somewhere in the middle there, try and meet the people of the country. And that's what I feel I can do best. And so in this case, what I felt we should do was just try and create a portrait of North Korea as it is now, of the people of North Korea. Try and hopefully just watch them, observe them in their lives, what they were doing, try and make connections between ourselves and themselves, all part of the human race and all that. I knew that we were not going to be able to deal with the political situation. No one was going to talk to us about anything like that. But what else was there? That's what interested me. What else could we find out? What would they let us do? So in a sense, each day was a different day. You weren't quite sure how it was all going to work out. So that made it kind of exciting and revealing at the same time.
From the previous travel shows that you've done, one thing that is always really evident is you have this amazing ability to communicate with people even though you don't speak the same language. There's just something warm about you. And
I think I can talk to people who don't speak the same language more easily than I can people who do. I've discovered that.
What were apart from the obvious barriers of kind of the control, and we'll talk about that in a second, what were the other barriers in terms of trying to get to people and communicate and find out and discover?
Well, I couldn't just go up to somebody and say hello. I could watch them. We had two guides, So Yang and Chun Chul, who were excellent. She's 28, he was around about the same age. They were the people I could talk to. And So Yang spoke very, very good English. And it was interesting. She wanted to know a little bit more about my life, but on the other hand, there were only certain things she could ask me and only certain things I could say to her on camera. So I suppose they were the two people I could talk to slightly off the record, if you like. Beyond that, well, you'll see that there were moments when we actually I've got amongst people without a feeling of being observed and being restricted, and that was great when those happened. There was a particular day on May Day when they all take off to the park and have barbecue and drinks and all that, and then all sorts of people talk to me there. But it was difficult to step outside the prescribed area and say I want to speak to somebody over there. But it became a little easier. Yeah.
The next clip we're going to see is your first day in Pyongyang, which we'll play the clip and talk about it in a second. It's terrifying.
It was quite alarming, that.
Did it wake you up?
I don't know if it woke me up, because it wasn't noisy. It wasn't a brash noise or anything like that. I was just aware that in my dream there was this strange vibrating music going, and it was part of me. And when I woke up, it was still there. When I looked out of the window, it was still there. I couldn't. What was really odd was I couldn't pin down where it was coming from. I couldn't pin down a speaker here, a speaker there. It was like, as I say in the commentary, it was like a suffusion of sound. It's like the whole city was sort of gently vibrating with this sound, and I didn't know what it was. It didn't sound like what it later turned out to be a very sort of patriotic song. As I say, it was much more like Brian Eno playing around with some new compositions and all that. But it was very, very strange at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was part of my dream. And you know, most of that day was a bit like a dream. That sort of started it, because Pyongyang is sort of very similar in some ways to the to our own cities. You've got tall buildings, you've got wide streets, and yet there's very little sound coming from the city. I say there, none of the sounds of the city we're used to, which is noise and rush and sirens and all that. It was just this quiet city with this music sort of gently vibrating around. It was very weird. And I was on my own, and I was probably a bit jet lagged still from flying out to China. But I said by 9 o'clock when the sun came out, it was I sort of could deal with it better.
Did you ever find out why they do it, why they play it? Did you ask the guides at all?
Well, I think they play it just to encourage the people to get to work or whatever, or just start the day with, it's called Dear General, Where Are You, Dear General? And everything is to do with the Kim family, the ancestors, the feeling that they are with you all the time. They're almost, you're viscerally part of you. And that's what I think this music was, right from the start. We own you. And this is the music that's happening and all that. That's what I think it was.
Yeah.
And every hour, then it would stop about 5:30, and you'd go to sleep for a bit, and then it would start again at 6 o'clock. And then there would be another one at 7 o'clock, another one at 8 o'clock. And it was just getting people in the mood for another day in this extraordinary state.
It's like a big giant snooze button for the entire city.
Yeah.
What, you cover a lot of ground in the series, 1,300 miles, I think you kind of covered around the country, and you get outside the city. Was it just in the city that they did that, or did that kind of happen out in the...
Well, outside the city, you saw different manifestations of the same idea, which was encouraging people to get to work and do the work. And in one city, went to Wonsan, which is across the other side from Pyongyang on the east coast. They just had ladies in the morning with kind of red flags, and they do a red flag, and they do a little sort of dance routine to the music that was laid out there to encourage people on their way to work. And these were sort of, I would say, ladies in their 40s and 50s, probably doing a bit of shopkeeping during the day, but they start off the day by doing a little dance, very seriously doing all the flag waving and the music played. Music is very, very important in North Korea. I mean, the North Koreans are like Koreans generally. They love music anyway. But music is very, very important. It's playing somewhere in the country all the time, somehow.
Wow. It's interesting as well, because the next clip we're going to see, you visit a school, which is incredibly interesting, because you'll see in the clip, you start off with all the boys kind of, trying to say their bit and talk to you and stuff, and you're very keen to speak to the girls in the class as well, and this is an incredibly moving piece when you visit the school. Wow, it's not what I expected.
That was not the school, isn't it?
It was not, yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
No, jolly interesting. Jolly interesting. Yeah.
They keep the children...
No one's left.
They keep the children well hidden.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get to the school clip in a second. But that's not what I envisaged the skyline to look like, and that's a really incredible shot that's never been done before as well, in terms of that view of the city.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, the Juche Tower is an interesting thing. It was built, I think, in sort of 1972 or something like that. And the number of, again, it's absolutely sort of concentrating on the great leaders and the beings of the great leaders. I think the number of blocks that were made to build the tower are something like the number of days that one of the supreme leaders lived on Earth, or lived. I mean, he's not died, actually.
No, he's still there.
He's still there. But I mean, things like that are very, very important. Everything relates back to the leadership. But it was, that was rather interesting, because we managed to get some drone shots. And that is the drone shot of the tower. And I think we'd asked, actually, if you could take a drone in, and there was a lot of toing and froing, and they said, no, you can't, absolutely not. Only the Americans do that. But but then we asked them, and they said, yes, well, if we can operate the drone, then and make it a North Korean drone, then you can use it. So this is, again, typical of the negotiations that had to go on while we were there.
Yeah.
And in the end, we got some wonderful drone shots, but it was quite difficult because the North Korean drone operator didn't really quite know what we wanted to get, or what it was all about that we were doing anyway. So there was a little bit of friction there, but we did manage to get some spectacular drone shots in the end.
And that was a constant thing where it was a to and fro with regards to, you know, compromise, I guess, in terms of...
Yeah, I mean, we had, and we don't disguise it because there's no point in doing that. We had, I think, well, the two guides who were on camera with me talking about, showing me around, and there were about 5 or 6 minders, 5 men and a woman, who were there from the tourist ministry. They're all in their suits. They were very nattily dressed in North Korea, very nice dark suits, and they would sort of be there. It was quite awkward actually for me because I was doing pieces to camera, and they'd all be ranged around behind the camera, and at the end they'd just go, and they call Neil, the director, out. They never talked to me directly.
Really?
They were very nice. They were very nice to me. I mean, part of the fact was I was at 75. Well, I was actually 74 when I went there. And I was 75 when I left. But I realised that old people are revered there, as they are in a lot of sort of East Asian societies. And So Young, who was my one of the guides, sort of took my arm, and I got out of the car every time, you know, and said, Are you very tired? Are you tired now? This was 9:15 in the morning, you know, we had 7 more hours to go before lunch even. But, they were sort of looked after me very well, but they would talk to Neil Ferguson, our director, and there was all sorts of little negotiations went on, and then they'd come back and say, yes, it's all right, you can do that. And generally we won a lot of the arguments, which was very nice. And we realised that you just can't go there and say, this is what we want, you've got to give it to us.
Yeah.
You've got to go with them, you've got to win their trust. It's absolutely vitally important. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to shoot anything at all. And the fact that we were able to shoot for, I think, 13 days we were there, every day, right across the country, I think was you know, a result of us talking to them and dealing with them and them dealing with us in a trusting way.
Tell us about the piece de camera that you had to redo. They're very specific about, and it's about, you know, you talk about the old people being revered, but even when you're talking about certain things, you have to present yourself in a specific way.
Well, I mean, anything to do with the likenesses of the great leaders, and there is on Mansudae Hill, there are 2 enormous, or 20-metre high figures of these 2 men. That's a very sacred part of the city and indeed North Korea. And yet we were there were sort of wedding parties being photographed there and all that. Certain conditions you could never actually, you had to take, if you took a photograph or shot them, they had to be in their entirety. No close-ups, no cutaways. It had to be the 2 figures in their entirety. So we had to do a piece to camera quite a long way back, with me looking up there, and I did what I thought was actually quite a good piece to camera. I was quite pleased with it, and I kind of was looking at it, and then I looked back, and there were all the, you know, oh dear, and I thought, what have I said now? And Neil came up and said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to do it again. And I said, well, just tell me, you know, what I said. If I said something wrong, just put me, no, you didn't say anything wrong, it's just you had your hand in your pocket. And that was what had affronted them. You cannot have your hand in your pocket in front of the great leaders, it's disrespectful. And for it, they were always coming up and checking my jacket from behind, because the shot was from behind. And I had my bag, my sort of trademark bag, and occasionally it got a bit rucked up, and suddenly 2 people would rush up and put the bag like that, you know, because again, you had to look just right. And the 2 leaders, I mean, they do look very impressive, but they also look very accessible. They've got overcoats on, they look very nice, they've got these nice glasses, they look like someone coming to, oh, I can say this, you know, sell you insurance or something like that. They don't look angry, they don't look threatening, they're not menacing. We didn't see much of that in North Korea at all. And they're smiling, everybody's smiling all the time, and they're always, whenever they're pictured, they're smiling benignly and wearing glasses very well.
I love as well the fact that one of the statues, his overcoat was changed recently as well.
Yes.
From the, you know, what the other...
Well, it was a sort of anorak thing before, I think, and then they changed it to something slightly more graceful, if you can say that. But I mean, the fact they changed one of those statues must have taken, a year to do. It's because they're huge statues and they're all bronze and they've got to be specially sort of reshaped and all that. But yes, they gave him a bit of a makeover.
Got rid of the anorak. We're going to see a clip of the school right now. That stayed with me for days after when I watched it, because her delivery is...
Yes, I watch it again and I feel slightly sort of tearful. And I mean, that wasn't prepared. She wasn't pushed forward. And indeed, I chose the people I spoke to in that class. And I thought, yes, we talked to 4 guys, we should have a girl as well. And she said she was a writer, and then recited this poem. And I didn't know, we have a translation here, I didn't know what the poem was about. But her passion and her feeling as it mounted up was just quite extraordinary. At the end we were all a bit tearful. I mean, it's a poem about the great leaders and about the sacred mountain, Mount Pektu, which is where the great leader came from. Well, it's the sacred mountain of Korea itself, but it's certainly the place where Kim Jong-il hid away. Is it Kim Jong-il? I can't remember. Kim Il-sung, thank you, director here. Kim Il-sung hid away there when he was fighting the Japanese in the 1930s. So it's quite important to them, that mountain. And she was suffused with feeling and reverence and devotion. Such devotion there. That was kind of powerful.
The fact that she said, though, that she wanted to be a famous writer was quite a startling thing for her to say, really, isn't it? What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, because it's a sort of artistic activity rather than anything else.
Yeah, because it's the idea of fame it seems completely,
Yeah, the
idea of being...
fame part of it, yes. Yeah, I suppose so. I think she just meant she wanted to do the very best she could for her country with the thing that she could do best, which was writing. So, I mean, fame is or very sort of relative to the leaders. You can never be personally famous. They control everything, but you can do your very, very best. I think that's what she was saying.
And it's interesting as well, because I have the impression that nothing gets into the country, nothing gets out of the country. So in terms of, I'm really intrigued in what her points of reference are when it comes to poetry and literature. And you're saying that you're the guide. She obviously knows about literature outside the UK, which I found really fascinating as well.
Yes, I mean, you could see that they were learning English, which was interesting. But as you say, they don't really know much about the rest of the world. They have their own internet system. You can't make calls out. We couldn't use our phones. We couldn't connect with the rest of the world. So it's very, very much enclosed world. But later on, when we were going out of Pyongyang, we went to an area which is a sort of rather beautiful gorge with a river running down. And we went, myself and So Yang, my guide, walked up, and by that time the minders, I think, knew us well enough to let us go, and they're all absolutely tired out, as we climbed further up. They'll say, we're going to stop here. So actually, when I talked on camera to So Yang at that point, they weren't vetting what we were saying, and she volunteered the fact that she read Shakespeare, and she knew about Wordsworth, and she knew about Jane Austen. And so, one could really, I wish we'd have had more time to have a conversation about what she'd gained from them.
Do you think there is any critical thought amongst the new generation there from what you kind of saw and experienced?
Well, I mean, I don't, not from what I saw and experienced. We just didn't get there. It looked as though they were giving me what they felt they were allowed to say. But as I say, So Yang and I had certain conversations, and she was clearly interested in the rest of the world. She was interested in what happened in London. I showed her pictures on my phone of my grandchildren and all that, and she loved all that. And, she was quite jokey, and so there was obviously something there which was not critical of the regime, but definitely looking for freedom somewhere else, to know about the rest of the world. And this is a really key thing I felt about the whole journey, is that North Korea, I felt as though they were preparing and they wanted to open up to the rest of the world, because they've had to. They spent all their money on these missiles and all that, the farming, the agricultural and food supplies are very, very scarce out in the countryside. So now they've got to get something back. And therefore they're building great tourist resorts. We saw an airport, an entire airport, which is totally empty. There were no planes there at all. But the airport is built, waiting for people to come to this tourist resort, which it will serve. So, and why build that if they didn't really want to get tourists in from China, maybe from the rest of the world?
And they let you see that? They didn't
Yes,
have, you know.
oh yes, yeah, exactly. And they were prepared to talk about that and say, we're going to have wonderful things. And evidently they had people who'd gone to Disneyland in Paris to look about how you build resorts like that, how you design them. So money had been invested in this opening up. So it isn't just a political rapprochement. I think it's something they need for their survival now. But when they do open up, then what happens to the sort of regimented Kim family thought? You know, that people are going to say, well, they do it differently in another part of the world, maybe we should do it differently. I just don't know. It's a very, very interesting time, I think.
As well as showing Soo Young pictures of your family, you also showed her some Python clips, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's right. Well, I didn't want to really, but the director thought so.
What did you show her?
Well, we were sat in this airport where there are no planes flying, waiting to get the one plane which was going to take us up to Mount Pektu, actually. Yeah. And we were just sitting there, and Neil had brought along some Python clips, including the fish slapping dance. And the fish slapping dance is one of those things which I think people you either have a sense of humour or you don't. I mean, it's not, you don't have to know the language and anything else, just two grown men hitting each other with fish and falling in a canal. And we just played it, and Soo Young looked at it, and she just cracked up. It was lovely. She just really laughed. She really gets the idea of it. So I thought, well, there's a market for us all. Yeah. The new North Korean sort of sport, fish slapping. I could become the advisor. It was lovely that.
Yeah, it's so weird to think of, you know, people not knowing Python, but it's, you know, they didn't know who the Queen was.
No, I did ask her. It's not there. When I said to the class, I'm from Britain. Did anyone know the capital of London? Someone said London. Good. Do you know anybody from England, from Britain? You know the Queen? No. Do you know Queen? Yes, we love their music. No, I didn't say that at all. But yeah, that was interesting. That sort of limitation there. But I think. You see, I get the feeling that I've been to South Korea. I'm sure people here have been to South Korea. People here may have been to North Korea. Anyone here been to North Korea? There we are. Yeah. One. Kim Il Kim Il Brown. But I mean, there's a boisterousness to the Koreans. They're lively. They like to sing. They like to dance. They like to drink. And I don't think that's separate. The 38th parallel, the DMZ has separated their sense of enjoyment, and it's still there on both sides. And they like to have a good time, and they like to laugh. And I think they probably could be quite, or oddly enough, they could be quite disrespectful. I can see them being quite satirical, but you know, they're just obviously not at the moment. But it was very interesting to get that feeling that these were not people who had been totally and completely stripped of all individual thought at all.
You captured it beautifully, and you seg perfectly into it, so let's take a look at this. Is May Day.
Oh yes.
That was amazing.
That was a day, yeah. I mean, there was no way that could be controlled by the minders, really.
Oh, exactly.
Just let us wander along. I don't think they stopped us filming at any point there.
That's amazing. What did you enjoy most about the experience of being in North Korea?
Well, I enjoyed finding out that it wasn't a dreadfully frightening, threatening, menacing place that I thought it might be. And I suppose I enjoyed making friends with the people there, or beginning to understand them a bit, which is what it was all about. As I say, even our stern minders, they weren't that stern in the end. And I had my 75th birthday while I was in North Korea. And at the end of the day, they just brought me a birthday cake. You know, they'd all organised it. The minders had organised this. And, you know, had a special party and food and all that. This huge, big, creamy birthday cake, which must have used up most of their agricultural output for about a year and a half, I would think. It was just vast and creamy. So you know, I suppose I felt more relaxed as time went on, whereas I did at one time think I'd feel slightly more fearful, slightly more awkward, slightly more uncomfortable, slightly more lonely there. But I didn't feel that, so that was the best thing that happened, really.
And you talked to me about as well about when you, that point when you were leaving as well, and that feeling that you all had as a crew when you left, which was a surprise to you all, I think.
Yes, I mean, again, talking about the crew, we talked a lot together and sort of evaluated the day together, and I think all of us had the same feeling at the end, which is just not what I'd expected, which is that we didn't particularly want to leave. I mean, it had sort of been inbred into me before I went that, you know, 6 days will be enough. You're going for 2 weeks. My God, you know, you'll want to get out. And we didn't particularly. And that was not just me, that was all the crew. I think we found that there was something there. I know that we'd been looked after very well, better than a lot of people who live in the country, I'm sure. But on the other hand, you know, there was this feeling that it hadn't been the monster. In fact, in many ways, it had been rather serene, rather peaceful. I mean, Pyongyang as a city is a wonderful city to walk around because there's no cars on the road, no traffic jams, you know, no sort of people being run over on bikes or anything like that. It's all very, very quiet.
No advertising?
No advertising, no, there's absolutely no advertising. No consumer advertising, which is quite odd, because we come from a society which is always trying to sell you things all the time. And so it's quite odd there. All they're selling really is the people united behind the leaders. And that's not as heavy, even that's not as heavy as I thought it would be. But so yes, I suppose my feeling was feeling of relief, tempered by happiness.
And you talk about as well how you feel there's a real sense of humour there, like, you know, when we saw that clip of Sue at the May Day and stuff, and there was I haven't seen this scene, which is in the second episode, where you try to film in a shop that sells propaganda artwork.
Oh yes.
But even that's comedic in the response that they had to you, rather than it feeling intimidating.
Yes, I mean that was a very odd. They have little sort of tourist shops, and we were outside Pyongyang. And we're at this beautiful sort of temple. This was one of the oldest parts of anywhere in Korea that hadn't been bombed. I mean, most of Korea has been bombed flat by the various wars, certainly most of North Korea. But this one town had beautiful old temples going back 1,000 years. And there was a gift shop, and they had carousels of cards. And a lot of the postcards were just postcards of propaganda posters. And a lot of them are very, very virulently anti-American, you know, sort of American soldiers, American GIs looking like a snake being sort of throttled, and someone smashing a hammer onto the White House and all that. And we thought, these are rather remarkable. Maybe perhaps buy some of these. And Neil suggested that I sent one to a friend who might appreciate them, an American. So I thought I'd send one to Terry Gilliam, you know, because he's sort of smashing things up and all that. He'd appreciate all this. And so we said, yes, we're going to do that. So I went back to the carousel. My camera was going, action. And suddenly it had gone. The one I was looking for had gone. So I turned it around a bit and they'd all gone. And then the other one had gone. I noticed the rather natty manager in a little suit just taking them out, giving them to the girl who was in national dress, standing behind the counter, and just put them under the counter like that. All the ones that had anti-American propaganda. We said, this is ridiculous. You know, it's so blatant. I mean, what's going on here? And so another little discussion took place at a very high level. And it turned out in the end that because President Trump was beginning to make some overtures towards Kim Il-sung and meeting up together, that they weren't so anti-American after all. So they were trying to get rid of all these awful images of America that they would have sold you a couple of months before. So, I mean, you might think that's quite an optimistic sign, how quick change can be.
Yeah.
But, so Terry Gilliam didn't have to send him rather nice ones, some flowers or something like that. Well, you don't understand that. What's with the propaganda ones? Well, Terry, it's a long story.
Would you go back?
Yes, I would go back. Yeah, I'd love to go back.
What would you like to explore when you go back?
I don't know. I don't know whether you'd be allowed to explore more. This is the interesting thing. I mean, just to go back and do exactly the same things, I don't think would interest me at all. But I don't know, it's a very interesting thing. If they were to see the programme, I don't know if they felt that there was, we'd been fair with them, they'd been fair with us, maybe we could go back and see a little more of the country. Certainly, my guides were excellent. They were really nice. I'd love to go back and see them. I mean, I don't know if they'll even see the programmes, that's the thing. I don't know if they even know what we've made of it. But it would be lovely if they did. I just feel there's unresolved business there. We've just got to go back and say, it was great filming with you. I know you've stopped us seeing half the things we wanted to see, but we sort of understand that. Now you've seen it, would you let us see more next time? I mean, that's my ideal scenario.
Yeah.
But I'd go back just because the airports are completely empty, no crowds in any of the airports, I know that. You could get straight in there. Straight
through security.
Straight to the beach, in Disneyland. We'd just be the only 3 people in Disneyland, North Korea.
In all your travels, and you've obviously travelled extensively over the years, and we've been lucky enough to see quite a lot of that. But how does it compare, like aesthetically in particular, to other parts of Asia that you've kind of travelled around?
Well, aesthetically it was quite interesting. I mean, this is an odd thing, but they have the 4th biggest standing army in the world. It all seemed to me a really forbidding statistic for a country that big, the 4th biggest standing army in the world. But what that army does is they're in construction, they're in the field, so you see they're everywhere in life. So they're not all armed and waiting to attack, actually. They're all sort of
got day jobs.
Involved in day jobs in the way of life. So, they can build quite extraordinary and quite attractive tower blocks in a year. The aesthetic is a very interesting one. They like primary colours as areas of, there's a lot of pink, a lot of flowers. It's a kind of slightly almost, I don't know what the word is really. It's or a kind of a childish, or a child's view of what buildings should and places and interiors should look like. And they have some wonderful big theatres and stages and all that. But everywhere is this sort of, I say, childlike aesthetic of flowers, bright colours, balloons, all that sort of thing. And I just wondered about that, whether that's part of the way the people are seen by the leaders, keep them in a state of sort of just enjoying themselves, happy as children of the fathers, which is how they see themselves. These are the great leaders are the fathers. And they, although they've died, they exist somehow, and this bond between them, the people and the fathers is complete. So it's like, it's all a bit like parents and children.
What was the most intimidating experience you had whilst you were there, would you say?
I'm trying to think what the most intimidating experience was. I mean, I can't think of anything, any personal intimidation. Can you? Now, have I told you anything?
No.
Because I sometimes forget things. Sorry.
We chatted about it before, so yeah.
No, there's nothing really intimidating at all. It was confusing, and it was unfamiliar, and it was strange. But intimidating, I don't think I felt anything at any one moment, no.
Did that surprise you that you didn't?
It did surprise me a bit. I mean, even in the second programme, I got to talk to a lieutenant colonel of the North Korean army at the DMZ. We were actually looking out over where the handshake had taken place only a few days before. And he was quite a tough cookie. He was telling, the way the history is, that they fought against the Americans, they fought against everybody else, and they have survived, and this is what makes their country so strong. This tiny little country with no help at all, that's how he sees it, had survived against the world outside. but the fact I was able to talk to him, I thought he would have been a rather frightening figure. But actually, again, he was able to, we could have some dialogue together. And I think because he was high up in the army, he didn't mind me saying, look, the DMZ is a pretty miserable place. I would love to come back. Because I said I'd been here before, but on the American side. And I said I'd love to come back in another 20 years and find that it's a park, you know, and there's a sort of a swimming pool and cafes and all that. And he said, yeah, that would be good too. So it's a little moment there of something less than sort of intimidation.
Yeah. Thank you for your questions. We've got loads here actually, so we're going to try and get through some of them. This is possibly one of my favourite that's had the most likes. What do you keep in your bag?
Not telling. That's a very good question actually, applicable to this, because usually in my bag I keep a guidebook, I keep a notebook, I keep a little tape recorder, all the things that you have to carry around with you if you're writing about where you've been. But actually in North Korea, I wasn't allowed to have any of these things. I wasn't really allowed to have a notebook, and I certainly wasn't allowed to have a tape recorder. I could take photos, that was all right, and my camera, that was about all there was in it. But that was an interesting sort of aspect of their attitude to the rest of the world, which is that anything about their country has to be produced from within the country. So a map or a guidebook I could not bring in. A guidebook of North Korea they would confiscate. Same way they'd confiscate Bibles. Wow. That was it. I didn't know that to start with, because they did say to me at the frontier, do you have any Bibles with you? Do you have any Bibles? And I thought, oh God, perhaps I should have brought a few. Yes, yeah. I'm a good man, honestly. I just don't travel with the with the text. And of course, that would have been the wrong thing to say, because no Bibles. Bibles were immediately confiscated. They're very, very strictly atheistic. They don't like missionaries at all. And that's a very, people are going there and try and convert the people. They're paranoid about that. So there wasn't actually much to put in my bag, really. Just,
snacks.
Snacks. Yeah, well, no snacks really. Just tissues. I think just tissues.
For all the crying.
Yeah.
This is great actually. What's it like being a woman in North Korea? Did you have any women in your crew?
Yes.
Were they treated as nicely as you were? It's interesting because there's quite a lot of women feature in the first episode in particular. I'm in love with the female traffic women.
Oh yes.
You see this?
Yeah.
Oh, they're fantastic.
Yeah. Yes, there are. The women are very much part of sort of national life, and they work and they're at the stations, they're in uniform, and there's this wonderful traffic police who do all the sort of control the traffic at major intersections, and they're young women, kind of in quite tight little sort of outfits and high heels. And they do this amazing sort of walk across all that sort of thing at the traffic intersection. I mean,
it's amazing.
It's rather wonderful in a way, but they're very much, they're very much part of life there. When we went to the airport, which was built but no one was there, they had, because we were there, they'd staffed it. So the ladies standing behind the various shops like this, waiting to be asked things and all that. I didn't speak to them. I sort of smiled at them a bit, but. Again, they're obviously very important to the tourist industry anyway, to have sort of quite attractive women doing around about the place. Women in North Korea, I don't know a lot. I talked to Soo Young about this, and she said, for instance, she's 28 years old, she's quite bright, very bright, and she said, for instance, I have got to be married by the time I'm 30. At 28 and unmarried that seems pretty extraordinary, and I will just be not exactly an outcast, but I will definitely will be seen to be an odd person if I'm not married by the time I'm 28. So she told me that. I mean, she went out, played sport, volleyball, and all that sort of thing. She took part in life generally, but I think that. As I say, married by 30, retirement age for women is 50, and men is 60. So in fact, I was 75, which is almost like walking out of the grave. There you go. Yes, very quickly, because when I was on my 75th birthday, like this, I was doing a sequence in the fields. We were at a collective farm, and we were going to show what it was like working on a collective farm. And had this very tanned lady in sort of mid-40s, been a farmer for a long time. And they did a sequence of me helping sort of plough furrows with a little hand hoe and all that. There I was doing all that, shaping the earth. And I talked to her at the same time. At the very end, we finished the sequence, and someone said to her, "Well, what was he like? Was he, is he good? Would you want him to work here?" And she replied in North Korean, and the interpreter said, "No." She said, "He's completely useless." I thought, that's great. That's completely no kind of, I've got a famous star here, I better be a bit nice about him. Just completely useless. I mean, what could he do? He can't even rake earth. Got me quite cross, because actually he was doing it perfectly well.
This had a lot of likes. Apparently all North Korean citizens are given a 5-litre beer voucher at the start of every month. What other amazing facts did you find out that have really stuck with you?
Yes, I know the beer voucher. We had the beer. Well, all right, I'll tell you an amazing fact just about beer. That the big brewery in Pyongyang, the equipment is entirely from a brewery in Wiltshire in England. When Usher's Brewery went out of business, all the equipment was bought by the North Koreans, and they make a very, very nice beer with it. So, Wiltshire above the 38th parallel.
Wow. Did you have to agree to any editorial sign-off from the North Korean authorities?
Well, as we were filming, they wanted to look at what we'd shot. That's true, isn't it? Really. I mean, at the end of every day, they would look at what we'd shot, and we would have to, we'd have to agree if they wanted changes. But they very rarely did. There were very, very few changes. And there was only one thing which they actually said you cannot possibly show that, and it wasn't weapons or missiles or concentration camp or whatever. It was actually in a restaurant where they served these brown noodles, which are sort of rather slurpy to eat. And it was a very nice restaurant, and they were showing me one of their sort of top gastronomic sort of treats, which is the brown noodles. But they stopped us filming because there was a table behind who were probably of the elite in North Korea, and they felt uncomfortable being on camera. So I think these might have been quite powerful people saying no, they didn't want to be filmed. That was the only time, am I right, Neil? Yeah.
Was the only time they asked us to delete something?
Yes.
The
only time they asked us to delete something, we didn't, did we? Oh, right.
Yes, Neil.
Yeah.
This is, now that you've returned to presenting travel programmes, 2012 the last time you did one?
Brazil.
Where to next, and will it be with Channel 5?
Well,
no pressure.
I'd love to work with Channel 5 again. We've had a very happy experience. They asked me to do it. They got the whole thing going. They sort of nursed me through it, and it's been a total joy working with them. Whether I do more travels, I don't know. I mean, I don't I'm freelance. I go wherever the people will give me the freedom to do an idea I want to do. I quite like to do some more travelling. I think about shorter travels maybe, and I'd love to do them at Channel 5, but if someone else offers me more money, only joking. The BBC come up with more money.
I'm just reading the questions.
Not much more, just a little more. Yeah.
This is kind of good in terms of a TV question to have for our last question. Given the groundbreaking TV you have made over the decades, what do you make of the claims that streaming networks like Netflix give more creative license to creators than traditional broadcasters?
Oh, that's rather a heavy one. I don't really know. I just think. Well, I think the more programs that are made, the more opportunities there are for people to do interesting creative work. That's the main thing. Just that people's imaginations, whoever they are, wherever they are, if these can be channeled to produce something, to delight or inform or entertain, the more chances you have to do that, the better. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Round of applause for the fabulous.